Good morning, everyone, and welcome to a very special coffee talk we have this morning. Uh, I, I'm Lexi McDowell. I am the Government Affairs Director. Unfortunately, our new CEO is on, she's with us. She has started, but she is at a conference this week. So you will meet her at the next one. Next week, we have a coffee talk ahead of Veterans Day with some very special speakers, just how to support and work with veterans as they enter the housing market, navigating VA loans, and different opportunities for partnership. And also just wanted to highlight for everyone, on November 20th is GPAR's general membership meeting. Early bird registration has been extended to November 6th. That is this Thursday for $25. There's free parking, soup, salad, hot entree. We have great panelists and guest speakers lined up. I will post the link to register in the chat. And as a final, let's see here, staff would love, of course, we'd all love to meet you. We will be providing information on the benefits of GPAR membership, license renewal, and realtor pins for distribution. We will also have special GPAR pins available for the first 100 people to visit our table. And as just a reminder to everyone, today is election day. I will also put in the chat information if you need help finding your polling place and information on the candidates on this ballot. And with that, I will pass the baton to our board president, Annette Collier, to introduce and welcome our speaker, Mr. Paul Cohen.
Yes, good morning, GPAR. Hope you're having a wonderful start of the day. Lexi, is the audio fine?
It's a little echoey.
All right, let's see here. Okay, is that better?
Yes.
Okay, great. So anyway, everyone, thank you so much for joining us this morning. I'm so delighted to be on this call with Paul Cohen, an attorney and a friend of ours. He is also a realtor, so I just welcome you so much. I want to thank HAPCO. I've been a member of HAPCO probably since the late 90s, and I appreciate all the great work that they've been doing. As we may recall, Barbara Capozzi, our past president, created the Real Estate Coalition. And so in that coalition is HAPCO, GPAR, and a few of our other partners. So again, Paul, welcome.
Thank
The
you.
last time we spoke, it was maybe in May when you were on with GPAR and you were outlining the recently passed security deposit installment plans introduced by Councilwoman Rue Landau. Do you have any data on the implementation of this legislation as of now?
Yes, and good morning, everybody, and thanks for having me. The legislation is set to go into effect on December the 2nd. It's interesting because there are already cases that have been brought against landlords for not complying with the law that isn't actually in effect yet. The law got passed by City Council, but it took a while for the mayor to sign it. Once the mayor signed it, then it goes into effect 90 days later, and that 90 days is December the 2nd. So it doesn't actually go into effect until December the 2nd.
Okay. All right. And so any other data regarding this, like has it been revisited with the council persons, or is this pretty much the final say?
This is pretty much the final say in its amended form. I don't remember when I spoke to you last. So I'll just real quickly recap what the law says so that everybody's on the same page. Basically, if you're taking a security deposit in excess of 1 month's rent, the tenant has the option of either paying it up front or and when I say paying it up front, paying it all up front or paying the additional amount over 1 month in 3 equal monthly installments. So for instance, if you rented an apartment today and the lease was, let's say, going to start on December the 1st, and you wanted to take 2 months in security, you could still collect 1 month up front, but the tenant would have the option of paying the second month in 3 installments starting January 1st, with the second installment February 1st and the third installment on March the 1st. Okay. The problem, which we still don't know what's going to happen, is what happens if the tenant doesn't pay those three installments? What are you going to do? The reality is don't have a lot of leverage. So you can go and take them to court and say they're in violation of the lease agreement and seek an eviction. As we'll get through in this talk, evictions take about 6 months in Philadelphia. So is that really a practical alternative? The answer is no. So there's really no enforcement mechanism that you really have to force the tenant to pay the additional security deposit. And that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for your work and your patience in dealing with all of that. And also our Government Affairs Director, Lexi McDowell, and our Government Affairs Committee. So really appreciate the work you all do.
Yeah,
The 10th,
I just want to say so people understand when you talk about the work that we do, the difficulty we have in getting things done in the city of Philadelphia. You basically have a one-party city that when they want to get something passed, and it's really pro-tenant, that one party, especially the head of the housing committee. So when they want to get something passed, it's very difficult to oppose it. And what we oftentimes end up doing is we get certain amendments that they'll agree to for us, but we can't stop the legislation. I keep trying and trying to just stop the legislation. We don't need more regulation in the city of Philadelphia, but as you can see from the makeup of city council, it's very difficult to do that.
right. Hopefully, either someone in HAPCO or somebody in GPAR will one day want to get into politics and go over there to City Hall, be a city council person. That'll be fantastic.
Yeah, unfortunately we need nine. And so again, there's 17 members of city council, so you need nine votes in order to get something passed. But yes, it will start. It starts with one. We did have Alan Dom, who was the past president of GPAR for a number of years, who did become a city council member, but again, he was just one member.
Right. The tenant financial assistance that was outlined with the home initiative is the $3,500 delinquency plan in place now.
Um, so it is in place now. It's not actually part of the home initiative. It's separate. There's funding through the home initiative. We hope. I'm not sure exactly how the funding is all going to play out. That's still being worked on, and we can talk about that. But as far as the $3,500 goes, yes, if you have a tenant that's delinquent up to $3,500, then that tenant qualifies for financial assistance. So what happens in the city of Philadelphia is before you can file an eviction complaint, you first have to file with diversion, the diversion program, and you have to wait 30
Eviction
days after
diversion.
filing for a diversion before you can file for eviction. When you file for a diversion, if the tenant owes $3,500 or less and they are low income or lower income, 80% of AMI, then they would qualify for financial assistance. Here's the key, and this is what I try and tell everybody. Make sure that if your tenant is delinquent, that you file immediately with diversion the first month they go delinquent, especially if the rent is over $1,750 a month. Because if it is, when they go delinquent the second month, they're going to owe over $3,500 and they will no longer qualify for tenant financial assistance. So you want to file with diversion. That's not filing an eviction. It's a pre-eviction filing. You're just filing with diversion, and then you're able to get that financial assistance for that tenant. And then once they get the financial assistance, the assistance covers an additional 2 months of delinquent rent going forward. So if they're delinquent, you want to file right away with diversion, get the financial assistance, and then you'll get the financial assistance for an additional 2 months.
I'm glad you said that. Can we kind of talk about when the eviction diversion program started? Because some of the people on the call may not know about that. We know it
Sure.
happened pandemic. Go ahead.
So with the pandemic, there was financial assistance that was offered through the federal government. So there was various programs. There was phase one, phase two, went actually up to phase four that the federal government offered financial assistance for tenants. The idea when COVID happened was to not have evictions filed against tenants, because the thought is that once an eviction is filed against the tenant, it goes against the record. It makes it very hard for that tenant to get credit, to get an apartment somewhere else, to be able to do a lot of different things that they need to do creditworthy wise. So the idea was to prevent evictions from being filed against tenants. It was okay at the time because the government was offering financial assistance. So, from a landlord standpoint, it was sort of okay that you weren't able to file for eviction because the tenant was able to get the financial assistance. The financial assistance event eventually ended through the federal government. The city of Philadelphia came along, however, and came up with their own program, which is wonderful, great program by the city. It's awesome that the city came up with this program, put a lot of money into it, and is offering that financial assistance. So that's what that financial assistance is now. The idea in stopping the evictions, as I said, was during COVID, and so that the eviction wouldn't go against the tenant's record. I've been arguing now for months, actually a couple of years now, that okay, COVID's over. We should now be able to go ahead and file against tenants that don't qualify for financial assistance. I get it if the tenant qualifies for financial assistance, we can delay the eviction, get them the financial assistance, and stop the eviction from happening. The landlord gets his money, everyone's happy. But if the tenant doesn't qualify for financial assistance, or there's some other reason that you're evicting the tenant, it could be the end of the term, they could be creating a problem at the property. There's no reason at this point that we should still have to go through diversion and wait the extra 30 days before filing for the eviction. So I've been pushing for it, been fighting for it. As I said, it's a very tenant-friendly city, so it's very difficult to get that done. But
But
I'm going to keep fighting. I haven't given up yet.
yeah, appreciate that, because what also happens is that the landlords, if they have mortgages, that's preventing them to make, them making their mortgage payment. So it just
Absolutely.
doesn't seem like that's being acknowledged enough, so that these landlords don't go out of business. It's totally different. And I know you'll probably touch on it, that most of the landlords in Philadelphia are small landlords. They're not like these large corporations that a lot of people think we are. So I don't know, you want to touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, that's correct. Most of the landlords in Philadelphia are what we call your mom and pops. You own 1 and 2 units. That's basically, I'm general counsel for HAPCO, and that's what HAPCO's members are made up mostly of your small landlords throughout the city of Philadelphia. And yes, when they don't have rent coming in, it's very hard for those landlords. You got 1 unit and there's no rent coming in, it's very hard to make your mortgage payments. So we'd like to see some assistance for those landlords. One of the things I've been fighting for is, okay, you want to have a 30-day delay. Why is the landlord out that money for the 30 days? Makes no sense. Okay. The city wants to come up with a program that says, okay, you have to first file for diversion and wait 30 days. Then the city should pay that 30 days to the landlord. There's extra money, believe it or not, in tenant financial assistance program. We're talking about increasing that $3,500 limit. That hasn't been done yet. It was actually increased from 3,000 to 3,500, looking to make that 4,000. But at the same time, I'm also looking to say, hey, a month's rent should go to the landlord if they had to go through diversion when they really shouldn't have had to do that.
Mhm. Very good. And how do you see the various components of the home initiative being introduced and implemented? You kind of spoke on it a little bit, but if it was your dream world, what would it look like?
Uh, um, is this being recorded?
It is being recorded.
um,
Be
it,
mindful.
it's a lofty goal. It's a great goal. The concern that I have is that it's a $2 billion program, of which $800 million is going to be funded through a bond. That bond has to get paid back. I don't know if you're aware of this, but that's going to be paid back at the rate of $65 million per year for the next 20 years to pay back that bond. oftentimes when a mayor or governor decides that they're going to have some program that they want to fund, um, they come up with a funding source for the program. So they go ahead, I guess the easiest example I can give you that most people are familiar with is the sugar tax.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So what they did was they floated a bond, and the bond was paid for through a sugar tax. Okay, you may be in favor of it, you may not be. It was great goals, it's funding pre-K and other educational things and other stuff that was funded through that tax. But it wasn't funds coming out of the general fund. It wasn't money that, coming out of your taxes. Okay. There was a separate tax, sugar tax. Thought it would, the idea was the sugar tax was a good thing, stop people from drinking sugar, sugary drinks, etc. And then that would fund a good program. Okay, I get it. Here we have a an $800 million bond that doesn't have a funding source. It's going to pay it out of the general fund. So $65 million a year is going to be appropriated to this. Okay, so that's the first concern that I have. It's like, where's that $65 million coming from? It's actually 2 billion. There's 200 million that the city's putting into it, and there's another 1 billion that's coming from publicly owned transfer of housing developments. And I don't really understand exactly how that's coming about. And are we actually losing that $1 billion? Is, we the city losing that $1 billion? Not really sure. Those details are very difficult to drill down to. And then where the money's actually going has to be funded through city council. I tell everybody, follow the money, see where the money's actually going. $2 billion is a lot of money that's going to be spent, so, somebody should be watching where that money is going. There are, however, going to be a lot of different programs through this home initiative that can help landlords. So my suggestion to everybody is to look and see all the different programs that are out there that can potentially help you. So for instance, if you need repairs done to your property, there's probably money available for you to make repairs. If you need lead paint abated, if you have lead pipes, there's a lot of different pools of money that are going to be available for landlords that they can access through this home initiative. So take a look at, $2 billion is a lot of money that's out there. So take a look at what's available and see if there's anything that can help you as a landlord to survive in the city of Philadelphia with the additional funding. And a lot of it's grants that doesn't have to get paid back.
Now, I'm glad you said that because from what I understand, it's about 42, 43 programs out there. Not necessarily all geared towards landlords, but, geared towards helping people stay in their homes and whatnot. So it will be interesting as time goes on in terms of what the mayor supports, how the money is spent, and also city council. So the good thing is we have you, we have our government affairs committee and our government affairs director to keep us posted on those things. So that's great. So what has HAPCO been keeping an eye on regarding legislation this fall? I know you kind of mentioned some things already. Are there some additional things?
Well, the other thing I do want to mention is as far as Councilwoman Landau, in addition to the security deposit legislation, she also got passed a limit on the amount of application fees that you can charge to a prospective tenant. That is now limited to $50. That also goes into effect as of December the 2nd. So starting on December the 2nd, if you have a new tenant, you cannot charge them more than $50 in an application fee. Okay, so if it costs you more than that, you're going to have to eat that additional cost, unfortunately.
So if there are two applicants, does that still allow you to spend or to ask them to apply $50 each, or it's only
Yes,
$50 for the household?
no, it's $50 each.
Okay.
That's a good question. I think it's $50 each.
Okay. All right. That's good. Any other legislation that you've been paying attention to this year?
There's a lot of legislation I've been paying attention to. A lot of it's coming out of Harrisburg. Let me just say this as far as Harrisburg goes, so it'll kind of make more sense in seeing what we're fighting and where it's all going. Harrisburg has 203 members of the House in Harrisburg and 50 members in the Senate. The House is divided 102 Democrats and 101 Republicans. It's the slimmest of margins, okay? But it is Democratic. And what happens is that a lot of legislation favorable to tenants is now coming out of the House since they have the majority. And the legislation is generally voted along party lines. So what you're seeing is a lot of legislation that's coming down that's favorable to the tenants. The Senate, however, is made up mostly of Republicans. So what happens is when that legislation goes over to the Senate, it passes the House, it goes to the Senate kills the legislation because they're more favorable to landlords. So I always tell people that the best legislatures you can have is a divided legislature. You don't want to have just a one-party rule because then stuff just gets rammed through. You want stuff to be compromised. You want it to be thought through. You want it to be something that makes sense and is good long-term legislation, not something that, okay, now one party has control and they can get things passed, then the other party gets into power, then everything gets reversed. You want legislation to be thought out. So it actually works having Democrats control one house and the Republicans control the other. That's part of the problem in the city of Philadelphia is you don't have two houses. You have one house and you have the executive, the executives Democratic as well. So you don't have that balance. And that's why a lot of legislation gets passed that probably shouldn't. In the Senate, so yes, we are following a lot of different things, the stuff that's getting through the House or is working its way through the House, but I'm not that concerned about it because a lot of that stuff is going to get killed in the Senate. So I could go through all the bad bills that are out there that are not favorable to landlords, very favorable for tenants, but if it's going to get killed in the Senate, we don't really have to worry about it too much.
I'm glad.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you go ahead and finish and I'll speak after.
Yeah, I was going to say a couple of the bills that probably will get through both houses is the domestic violence bill, which is going to basically protect tenants that are victims of domestic violence, which personally I'm in favor of. I don't like regulations. I think landlords as a whole should help members of the public that are victims of domestic violence, just as a general overall human factor. It's a terrible situation that the person is in. And I personally think we should be helping that person, but I also feel that it should be up to the individual landlord, and it shouldn't be for the government to dictate that this is what you have to do.
So what exactly is it saying the landlord does if there's a domestic issue?
So we have to wait to see what the final legislation is going to be because it's going to be compromised, but it's basically going to say that the tenant, that is the victim of domestic violence, is going to be able to terminate the lease agreement without penalty. So they might have to pay for one additional month. They may have to have some type of proof of domestic violence. And the question, there's a question over what that proof has to be, whether it has to be, actual court order, or is it something from a healthcare provider, so that has to be worked out. With the idea being we want to protect landlords from abuse. We don't want everyone just coming along saying they're the victim of domestic violence when they weren't. So that's really what we're concerned about the most.
Okay.
The other bill that's probably going to get passed is a ceiling bill, record ceiling, not ceiling height, ceiling, like SEALING, to seal the record. So if a tenant goes to court and wins, then that record shouldn't go against the tenant. That's the thought. Okay. The idea is that kind of like innocent until proven guilty. If the tenant is found innocent, why should that record be out there that's going to hurt them in being able to rent an apartment? Makes sense in the abstract. In the reality, in the practical world, is if the tenant's been taken to court numerous times, okay, generally there's a problem, and oftentimes landlords will just, say, okay, you know what, just leave. I'll withdraw the case, just get out of my property. Oftentimes, you do cash for keys, you give the tenant money so that they leave the property. So there's oftentimes something else that's going on there. So landlords kind of like to see that and be able to know whether or not there was a filing against the tenant. It's a hard argument to make from a legal standpoint to say that if the tenant was actually found to be in the right, or the case was withdrawn, that record shouldn't be sealed. So at some point, I'm guessing that legislation is going to get passed. What I'm trying to do is say, and this is one of the things I'm trying to push for, is to say, okay, you know what, if we're going to allow this to get passed or not oppose it, since it's going to happen anyway, let's try and get something out of that. So as a landlord, let's get something that's favorable to landlords. So, and I can go through a couple of different laws that are favorable to landlords that I'm trying to get passed, just in general, which is very difficult. But if we can package it with something that the tenants want, then maybe we can get that passed.
Sound like good strategy.
Yeah.
But I also wanted to say that I think it was back in May, June of 2025. Those of us who go up to the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors business meetings, we did Hill visits. And all of the legislators that represented District 1, our area, they all said that they were getting multiple calls from landlords in Philadelphia concerned about, whether they were going to be able to keep their properties, their passing of their wealth to the next generation. So it is ringing up there in terms of the concerns of landlords. And I would encourage our members that are on today and any of your friends, when there's opportunities to go up to Harrisburg, I encourage you to do so. And I also encourage you to come to the business meetings so that you know what is going on legislatively. And it is free, by the way.
And also to show up at city council when council meetings are taking place with regard to a landlord-tenant bill. That's really important.
Oh, yeah.
We need
Yeah.
numbers.
Oh, yes. And
The
it's
ten,
interesting.
I was going to say the
Okay.
tenants come out in force. So
Mhm.
we need landlords to come out in force as well.
The other week, maybe about 3 weeks ago, HAPCO had a meeting at Esperanza. GPAR members were invited as well. There were some that came, so thank you so much for your support. But Councilwoman Cindy Bash, she specifically said that we need to come out in numbers when there is legislation that we don't agree, or even those that we do agree, because the others, meaning the tenant groups, oftentimes are outnumbering us, and we already know about the 2 minutes for us. And everybody else 20 minutes, an hour. Now I'm only exaggerating with that, but the two
No,
minutes, I'm not exaggerating about that,
no.
that happened to us.
Yeah,
Um,
I was thrown out of city council for continuing to talk. And I wasn't even given
yeah,
2 minutes.
yeah. We got to be reminded of democracy, freedom of speech, and everybody should have equal time. And are you hopeful that any of the landlord policies and regulations outlined in your 2-inch thick book on being a landlord in Philadelphia could be streamlined or simplified within the home initiative?
No, that was easy.
Okay.
Yeah,
All
no,
right.
it doesn't appear as if they are going to take back any of the laws that are currently on the books. Just
Now,
want, I'd be happy if I could just stop any more from coming about. Doing away with ones that are there, that's a tall order.
well, and speaking about that, can you provide some history on HAPCO and how you came to work with them? And what do you think is the future direction of the organization?
Um, I've been representing landlords for a very long time. Let's just say I'm not gonna tell you how many years. And as a person that represented landlords and represented mostly as an attorney, I represent mostly large landlords throughout the city of Philadelphia, actually the state of Pennsylvania and New Jersey and Delaware. Uh, Believe it or not, um, even though I represented large landlords, I was a member of HAPCO for years and years, and I found the information that they provided was very helpful. Daryl Zaslow used to be general counsel for HAPCO, and he and I have worked very closely together in trying to get legislation, I'd like to say passed, but mostly it's getting legislation not passed or killed, is generally what we're trying to do in the city of Philadelphia. And he and I worked on the Joint State Government Commission to rewrite, I actually chaired the committee to rewrite all the landlord and tenant laws throughout Pennsylvania. I'm still working on that. That's another story for another day. Um, but in working with Daryl for years, I knew HAPCO, and like I said, I was a member of HAPCO. And then when Daryl passed away, HAPCO came to me and asked if I would be their general counsel. And that's how I became general counsel of HAPCO. It's a great organization. It's tough running that organization from a financial standpoint because it's all of your small landlords. So I'm also involved with the Pennsylvania Apartment Association, which represents your large landlords, and that's a lot of my clients. And you know, your larger landlords have a lot more money. And it's easier for them to fund an organization. It's hard when your members are struggling to survive, especially in the city of Philadelphia, which with all the regulation that's out there, for them to also pay dues and what have you to HAPCO. So it's tough from that standpoint, and that's why HAPCO just needs numbers. Numbers are huge, and City Council listens to HAPCO because HAPCO is your mom and pops, your small landlord, your landlord that lives in the city of Philadelphia, has a property in the city of Philadelphia, and cares about the city of Philadelphia. And I find City Council cares more about HAPCO members oftentimes than they do about your larger landlords.
Oh yeah, and I mean, one of the conversations that I've had with HAPCO, I'm a member of HAPCO, and I think several of our members are. I really encourage people to consider joining because the newsletter that comes out, there's a chat where people are communicating about contractors that they think are good to use, etc. So I do want people to be aware. I know that some of the realtors do not necessarily do property management. But if you are going to get involved and if you are going to be selling properties to investors, it would be good for them to be aware of HAPCO. I think in the chat, the web address might be there for HAPCO, but I strongly recommend it. It keeps you updated with the specifics as to what's going on in Philadelphia. Because trust me, if your client is not aware and they do something wrong, such as not having a bed bug addendum, not having a lead-based paint certificate, and things of that nature, they're going to have a problem. They're going to lose a lot of money. And so you can actually be an asset to your client by consulting them and making them aware of the various resources. So thank you very much. But I kind of think HAPCO, isn't HAPCO like about 100 years old? Oh, it's been around a long
Uh,
time.
It's not 100, but it's been around for a really long time. And just to your point, the newsletter is great. The forum is awesome, where people share information. There's also the HAPCO handbook, which goes through everything that a landlord needs to know to be a landlord in the city of Philadelphia with all the forms. Their website is really good. And we have an Ask the Attorney once a month, hosted by me, where people can get on for free and ask questions. And I'm happy to answer them for them. Happy to do that today as well.
Very good. Thank you so much. What are some recent developments in the city and at the state level that you're following, or trends you are noticing in landlord-tenant law, your practice? You kind of mentioned a lot of things already, but
Well,
maybe there's something more.
yeah, some of the things that we're trying to get done, which are rent control preemption. And what that means is that rent control would not be allowed in any city or municipality in the state of Pennsylvania. So this would be a state law that basically stops. So it's the reverse of rent control. So a lot of municipalities, like the city of Philadelphia and other places, are trying to pass rent control ordinances, and you're seeing this throughout the country. So to get ahead of that, what we're fighting for is rent control preemption. A bill like that would say that you can't have rent control anywhere in the state of Pennsylvania. There are 35 other states that have rent control preemption. Would love to see that in the state of Pennsylvania as well. If you talk to economists, almost all of them will tell you rent control does not work. It's just that it's a bad policy. And so it's something I really would like to see happen in the state of Pennsylvania. One of the things you're seeing in Philadelphia is they don't call it rent control, they call it rent stabilization. I love that term.
Uh,
Okay. And there's other forms that rent control takes. So, for instance, good cause eviction, where they say that in order to be able to evict a tenant, you have to have good cause. Currently, and I fought this along with Darrell years ago to get it to the point where we compromised it to say in the city of Philadelphia, if you have a lease for less than 1 year, then you would need good cause eviction. But if you have a lease for 1 year or more, then you don't need to have good cause. And good cause basically says that before you can evict the tenant at the end of the term, so your term is over, and you, for whatever reason, you decide you want to not rent to that tenant anymore. You should have the absolute right to do that. Good cause eviction, however, says that you can't just decide not to rent to that tenant. You have to have a good reason for not renting to that tenant before you can just terminate their lease. Okay. It's a form of rent control because tied to that is if you increase the rent too much to evict it, they're going to say that you're raising the rent to evict the tenant and that that's not good cause. And one of the bills we are following is uh, there is a bill out there in the city of Philadelphia to make good cause evictions, not just for leases for less than a year, for all evictions. And as I said, that's kind of like one of the first steps toward rent control.
yeah, thank you for pointing it out. That's very
Yeah.
serious. I know
One,
we have a, I'm
yeah.
sorry, go ahead, Paul.
No, I was going to say one of the other laws that I would really like to see happen, and it's something I think can happen, is a squatter law.
Oh, yeah.
Everybody agrees that squatters are a problem. We should be able to figure out a way to get squatters out of the property a lot quicker. And right now, believe it or not, a squatter has more rights than a tenant. And as real estate people, real estate people, realtors, members of GPAR, you guys understand this as much as anyone because you've taken the classes in real estate, and there's the bundle of sticks and the bundle of rights that um, owners or people in real estate have. So a tenant actually is an owner of a property. They have an ownership of the right in the property. It's a tenancy right for 1 year. They actually own that property, right? Okay. Well, a squatter is considered to outrightly own the property, believe it or not. That's the argument that they're making. They're saying, "Hey, I own that property. Not just I have the right to live there. I own the property." That's the argument. So a squatter actually is claiming more rights than a tenant. And because of that, you can't just go into landlord-tenant court to evict or get rid of or eject that tenant or squatter. You now have to go into common pleas court, and it's a lot more complicated process, and it takes a lot longer to be able to get a squatter out of your property. So one of the things I would love to see happen, and I'm pushing for, is to have a separate court, like a squatter court.
Mm.
in common pleas court that you could get into court within 30 days and you would get a judge that handles a lot of these cases and understands what these cases are all about, and there'd be a procedure for being able to get that squatter out of your property. Um, Part of the problem, however, is that in order to actually get the squatter out at the end of the day, so you go to court, you get a court order, you still have to go through the sheriff's department. And as we all know, that takes a really long time in the city of Philadelphia, which is a whole separate issue.
Oh, yeah. Well, I know that we have a lot of questions, and you're one of our most popular guests on the Coffee Talk. So thank you so much. Lexi, can you help us out with the questions in the chat?
Absolutely. The first one is about the application fees, asking if there's a limit. I'm assuming, Greg, your question, if it's a capped at $50, is it the same as credit reports?
It has nothing to do with what your credit report charges are. That you have to pay. You can only charge the $10 and $50. If you want to run a credit report that costs you more than $50, that's on you. If you want to do a fraud check to see whether or not the applicant is who they say they are, and it costs you however much it costs you, you're going to be out that money. It's one of the things we push for. We say we should be able to get our actual costs. Why are we losing money? This is insane. But
And I
believe it or
believe
not,
that also goes into effect December 1.
December 2, yes.
Excuse me.
Believe it or not, we had a fight to get it to $50. That was a struggle,
Yeah.
right? They were originally it was $30.
The
Yeah.
next question, we take 1 month security and last month's rent in advance. Does that violate the new law?
Uh, it doesn't violate the law. The tenant just has the option of paying that last month's rent in advance over 3 months. So the last month's rent in advance is a security deposit. You can call it whatever you want. The Supreme Court ruled a few years ago that last month's rent in advance is a security deposit. So prior to that Supreme Court ruling, nobody was really sure whether or not the last month's rent was a security deposit. Tenant organizations for years have argued that it was a security deposit. We argued that it wasn't. It was last month's rent in advance. It's not a security deposit. The reality is it is a security deposit, and that's what the Supreme Court has said. So consider that last month's rent just like a security deposit. So there's really no point at this point in calling it the last month's rent in advance. And just to that point, also be aware that after the first year, you can only hold 1 month in security. So if you take 2 months in security, and if the tenant pays it up front or they pay it over those 3 months, at the end of the first year, you must refund 1 month of security because you can only hold 1 month. Okay. My suggestion to you is apply it to the 13th month of the rent. You sort of never want to give tenants back a check. You just want to tell them, okay, you don't have to pay the 13th month's rent, but make sure that that's done at the end of the first year.
Paul, in regards to the spreading of the money, do you have to volunteer and tell them that they can spread out you have to volunteer that. It's not
Yeah,
them
you have
saying
to
to
you
you.
have to you have to give them that option.
Okay,
And actually, on the HAPCO website, I just put on an addendum that you can use that spells that out.
great.
Another question, a Section 8 tenant that agreed and signed a notarized paper to pay an extra $195 a month on top of what PHA will pay. Since she wasn't, this landlord wasn't accepted for the offer from PHA, she now refuses to pay the extra amount. What can I do in this case?
Nothing. You're not supposed to take extra money.
Okay.
Violates the HUD guidelines.
Do you need the tenant's cooperation in order to file a diversion?
No. So in the past you did, and that's what part of the problem was. One of the things that was a problem with diversion is the landlord had to file for diversion, and the tenant had to also fill out the paperwork for diversion. Now it's all done as one filing that the landlord does.
Great. I have received a judgment by agreement through a mediation process with a tenant. The tenant now has breached the agreement and did not move out by the date stipulated. What's the next step for us?
You have to file for eviction. I'm sorry, and that agreement was reached in diversion? Missed that part.
Judgment by agreement through a mediation process.
Yeah, so I assume that's through diversion. If you haven't filed in court yet, then you now have to file in court. That's one of the problems with the diversion program that I'm trying to fix, is that diversion is a pre-eviction filing, meaning that you're filing with diversion before you file an eviction complaint. Because there's no complaint out there, there's no court case. So when you reach an agreement, that agreement is not part of a court case. It's outside of the court case, so it can't be enforced by the court. So when a tenant doesn't follow through with the agreement, you're back to square one and you're filing an eviction case. That's my biggest argument with the problem with diversion and agreements in diversion, is that agreement only helps the tenant. You have an agreement. You have a lease agreement. That's an agreement with the tenant. Tells them they have to pay. They haven't paid. Now, in diversion, they're trying to force you to enter into a new agreement. I already have an agreement with you. I got a lease. You didn't pay it. Okay. So now I got a new agreement with you, and now you violated the new agreement, and I can't even enforce that new agreement. I got to go to court based on my old agreement, my lease, because the lease is better than whatever agreement you've reached with them in diversion. That agreement only helps the tenant. So you're not trying to enforce that agreement. You want to enforce the lease agreement. It's absurd. Sorry, don't get me started. Well, you did.
I believe this question is in reference to application fees, but it says, is there any provision for small owners, those small landlord owners that own under a certain number of units to be exempted from the application fees?
Um, that's a
I,
great question.
I vaguely remember it was if you had two or
Two or
three
less, yes.
or less, yeah.
Yes. For two owners, if you own 2 units or less. I was trying to get it at 15 units or less.
Yeah.
That was the best I could do. People are like, only two? It's like, okay, it was that or nothing.
Okay, many Philadelphia landlords do not have rental licenses. In your experience, what have you seen such landlords do when facing a non-paying tenant? Assuming mediation and cash for keys do not work, it seems like the only option for these quote unquote landlords is to see a self-help eviction. Are there other options? I know the
Self-help
best
is
advice is
never,
to maintain full compliance with the city, but I'm sure there have been many instances where this was not the case.
self-help is never a good option. Self-help is actually a criminal offense. You can go to jail for doing a
Ooh.
self-help remedy. So I do not recommend doing self-help. Cash for keys is your best option. I know you said if cash for keys doesn't work, there's a number that does work. So you got to find that number. Hopefully, it's not too outrageous, because otherwise, there's really not much you can do other than complying with the uh, city guidelines and going and get your licenses and doing what you need to do to be able to proceed with the eviction. So cash for keys is generally your best option at that point in time. Another option is sell the property and give it to somebody else and let it be their headache, assuming they're willing to take it on.
I just want to add that, we have real estate licenses, so the courts will hold us at a higher stance. So, just be careful of that. You don't want to ruin your livelihood.
Yeah, you don't want to do self-help. That's not a good option. Having said that, I will tell you there are times I recommend it off the record, honestly, where the tenant is just abusing the property, destroying the property, doing things that they shouldn't do. It kills me that the tenant can do whatever they want to do. That's illegal. First of all, they're not paying the rent, right? So what gives them the right to not pay the rent? They have a contract, they have an agreement. They're supposed to pay the rent. They're not paying the rent. What gives them the right to destroy your property? You know, so all the things that give the so-called tenant the right to do those things, in my opinion, sometimes it requires the landlord to do what they got to do. After that, this is recorded, but that's off the record. But
Um,
honestly, the courts are sympathetic to an egregious situation. It's got to be really bad. You don't just do it where it's a tenant isn't paying the rent, but when it's really bad, tenants destroying the property, there's a legitimate fear that they're going to burn down the property. There's drugs going on at the property. They're making it bad for other tenants in the building. There's situations that warrant you doing what you got to do.
Someone asked if there's a list of the city's program and contact information for them. The 42, 43 different housing programs. I'm not sure if there is a compiled list on the city's website.
If you look up the home initiative, it'll come up and give you all the different programs. They haven't all been finalized yet, so they're still working through them, but it'll give you a good idea of what's going on and what's out there.
And
And
also, if I may add, so the Philadelphia, what was it? The Philadelphia Wonder Woman tour. Some of our Realtor members were a part of that, and in the booklet, there are these programs that are listed. So I don't, Lexi, I'm not sure if the office has it or not, but that was out there.
and um, to the gentleman who posted the question, I'll be sure that that gets added to the GPAR website for our members to reference as well. Someone asked about the home initiative. I shared that link as well, and I'll be sure to add that to our webpage for access. Where do you find the grant money for landlords? Is that on the HAPCO website as well?
There is some information on the HAPCO website and through the city websites, you can find that as well.
I think
City-
Lauren put some information in the chat in regards to information that HAPCO has. I don't know if you see that,
Yeah,
Lexi. Okay.
working. Yeah, I had seen that. Another question about if in terms of the more than 1 month rental deposit, will there be a place in the lease to document this, or is it a free form to be filled in?
If you go to the HAPCO website, there is a form, an addendum to the lease agreement that has it.
Just as a reminder to everyone, Paul mentioned and that the HAPCO newsletter is super helpful. If you would want to sign up for that. Someone asked about if GPAR can let members know when there are hearings and meetings regarding real estate. Unfortunately, it is another email, so be sure to just read the communication that is sent out to you. We do provide and reach out to members as far as call to action. So be on the lookout in your inboxes for those announcements as well. Uh, Paul, where can people get a copy of your 2-inch book on how to be a landlord in Philadelphia?
The HAPCO handbook it's all been pretty much consolidated into the HAPCO handbook. So if you become a member of HAPCO, you can get a copy of that handbook.
Great. Large landlords add multiple fees to the base rent, such as water, pest, trash, sewer. Can small landlords add to this league? Small landlords do this legally as well?
Uh, that's a very complicated question, but I'll try and answer it simply, is that a word? As easily as I can. There is a huge movement to eliminate what's called junk fees. So you see it with tickets ticket prices where, you go to buy a ticket through StubHub and the ticket's $100. Next thing you know, you click through it all and you're ready to buy the ticket and you find the fee is another $80 and your $100 ticket's now $180. And that's something that they call a junk fee that it should have been disclosed upfront that the ticket price was $180. A lot of other industries have it. The apartment industry has a lot of additional fees. They were considered junk fees. The attorney generals got together and through the federal government, they were trying to change that. It was changed in a lot of different industries. They specifically said they were not going to address it with regard to landlords. It was like, shoo, that was good. We dodged the bullet for now. Okay. Those charges that you're talking about are basically your junk fees. Okay. Those are fees that need to be disclosed to the tenant up front. Okay. It's not called rent, it's called additional fee. So the first question is that whether or not the landlord is making a profit on those fees. And if the landlord is making a profit on those fees and isn't just passing along the fee, why isn't the landlord calling that rent? Well, the landlord's not calling it rent because the landlord wants the rent to appear low, which is why that's a problem because it's deceptive to the tenant. At least that's the argument that's being made. Okay. So far, on a federal level, we don't have legislation with regard to it. I can tell you that I am presently on a task force in the city of Philadelphia where that is being looked at to figure out a way for the city to regulate that. So my guess is it's not going to be too long before there's going to be a bill introduced, probably in the beginning of next year, that's going to deal with those additional fees. So large landlords aren't going to be able to charge that, and you won't be able to either. The short answer to your question is yes, you can charge it as well. Now, I wouldn't make a profit on it. So that's where you run into a problem. If you're looking for additional profit, it should be in the rent. If you want to pass along the charge and you don't want it to show up as rent, you want to disclose to the tenant, hey, this is what your charges, your rent is made up of. And this is a separate charge that you have to pay. That's perfectly okay. Current.
Paul, we have a lot more questions, but I want to just do a quick check-in on your time if you're
No,
available.
I'm good. I'll try and answer quicker.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
Aside from supporting HAPCO, what other actions can we take to advocate for stronger landlord protection and push back against government overreach?
We have to get city council to change the legislation. So back to Annette's point of what are some of the things that, through the home initiative or elsewise that we can get city council to roll back regulations, very difficult to happen. Like I said before, I'm happy if I can just stop any more regulate. Like we first have to stop. We got to stop it before we can start going the other way. There's just more and more regulation that's out there that we're trying to stop. So we're not even at the point of stopping things, let alone having it go backwards.
Do you know or have any information on the regulation that Philly landlords must live within 25 miles of the city?
Um, I know there was talk about changing that, and I think it's changed for certain jobs in the city. I'm not sure which ones. I haven't looked at that in a while. I would have to look at that again. Sorry.
well, my understanding is if they live more than 25 miles away, they have to hire a property manager. So I have a client that's in, where's she at, North Carolina. And so I service her because she is so far away from Philadelphia.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't understand the question. Yes, I thought you meant with regard to employment. As far as having a registered agent, yes, you have to have a registered agent in the city of Philadelphia.
Are you able, could you please explain the rental suitability and why it is needed?
Um, it's needed because there's a law that says it's needed. Why it's actually needed is it's not. That's the best answer I can give you as far as that goes. You have to provide that to the tenant. When the law was originally introduced, I actually fought that law. took it up to the Commonwealth Court. It got remanded back to Common Pleas Court, and we were able to settle that case. I settled it in such a way that there was no fee to the landlord. They originally, believe it or not, wanted to charge landlords $75 a unit to have the certificate of rental suitability. They also wanted landlords to attest to it, so that it would be a criminal violation if you falsely swore that you had a valid certificate of rental suitability. So right now, the bottom line of the certificate of rental suitability is it doesn't really do anything. It's just you're self-certifying that the property is okay. And the city just checks to see if there's any violations. Well, the city's checking every year anyway, because you got to get your rental license. So they're already checking to see if there's any violations against the property. So it really is a very watered down law, based on the compromise that we reached, but it is something that's still required. The problem really is that it's another trap for landlords, because if it's another thing that you have to do, and if you don't do it, then the tenant doesn't have to pay the rent. It's such that the tenant doesn't have to pay the ongoing rent, but any rent the tenant paid, the tenant doesn't get back. And that was a huge court decision that came down saying that the tenant doesn't get the money back if you don't have the certificate of rental suitability. So if your tenant stops paying and you don't have it, go get it immediately, because you're not going to be able to file to evict that tenant unless you get that certificate. Probably more
Uh,
than you needed, but
Next question
yeah.
was trouble for landlords getting rental licenses because the city records are not showing the current owner. Do you have any information on this? That take the timeline several months to correct uh,
It
city
shouldn't take
records?
several months to correct. That should be something that's relatively easy as far as who the owner is, and the city should have that. The city is cross-referencing those things, so it's very rare that that situation shows up. It used to show up a lot more because the city's computers didn't talk to each other, but now that their computers do talk to each other, that really shouldn't be a problem, and that's something you should be able to fix very quickly by showing the city, here's a copy of the deed, here's who owns the property.
Is there any law or regulation that assists single female landlord tenant or landlord tenant with minor children who have financial difficulties?
Not that I'm aware of.
I'm sure there's some, they would qualify under some of the different programs, one of the many different programs, but yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. If you look, there's tons of programs that are out there for different religions, for different situations, if you have AIDS. So yes, there are a lot of different programs. The problem with a lot of those programs, and at some point in time, I was trying to compile a list of all those programs. And what I found was the difficulty in doing that is they run out of money. So they're only funded to a certain degree. It's not like they have unlimited funds. So once so many people go through the program, they run out of money, then that's no longer available. You have to wait till it becomes available again. So it was so hard to track which, first find out all the ones that are out there and then find out which ones still had money. It was like, I'm checking this every day. So I gave up on that project, but you can look that up. There's lots of different programs, and there's ones that are popping up all the time.
There was a question, I'm not sure what it is back to referencing it within the discussion, but about some squatters that produce a lease.
If the squatter has a lease, they're no longer a squatter, they're now a tenant, and that's actually a good thing. Of
It's a
course,
fraudulent lease.
if it's a fraudulent lease, it's a different problem. And the bigger problem that we're running into with regard to that is somebody acts as the landlord and fraudulently gives the tenant a lease. That's the problem. So the
Yeah, that's
actual
very
landlord
common.
didn't, the owner of the property didn't give them a lease. Somebody fraudulently gave them a lease, and the person said, "Hey, I got a lease agreement. I've been paying the rent every month." Well, technically, they're a squatter.
There was a question about a bed bug addendum, but I believe Jackie answered that. Responsibility for remediation when bed bugs occur. That can be found at phila.gov. Uh,
Yeah,
uh,
real quick, during the first year, you have to, as the landlord, take care of any bed bug problem. After the first year, the cost between the landlord and tenant are shared. Nobody knows what the word shared means, i.e., is it 50% equally shared? Doesn't say equally shared, just a shared. What does that mean? To be determined.
uh, Someone asked if you could name the various disclosures to be given to a tenant.
All of them? I got a book here.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. Go on the HAPCO website and it lists them all there.
Right. What is the cost to file a diversion?
The actual cost with the city, I don't know that there is any cost, actually. I don't know. That's a good question.
Paul, if I can answer, this is Priya. There is no cost in filing directly with the city. But if you want HAPCO to do eviction surveys, we do have a cost, which is mentioned on the website. Thank you.
Thank you, Priya.
No problem.
This is, I think similar to a question asked earlier. They do not have a lease with a family member and they will not leave the property. How do you get them to leave? The property is up for sale and it is an estate sale. Does the executor of the estate have to file through the eviction process?
Yes, you can go through the eviction process in that situation.
Every large landlord adds lots of additional fees. If the fees are disclosed in advance, can we legally collect fees for water and trash?
Yeah, we had that question.
Yes. A member of HAPCO and own a property management company, can I use HAPCO's eviction services for my clients?
Yes.
Yes, okay. A lot of risk to be a landlord, excessive damage to property, squatters, licenses, etc. What is the incentive for a new investor?
Oh, wow. Woo,
Great question.
it is.
It's actually a very simple question. You got to buy at the right price. Yeah. Real estate 101, you make the money on the buy. If you don't buy at the right price, it's going to be very difficult to make money. And it's got to be, that right price has got to be the right price. You buy a market rate, it's going to be very difficult to make money in the city of Philadelphia. By the way, that's one of the things I tell all council members. I say, listen, if I had $1 million and I gave that to you, and you had an option of investing that money in rental property in the city of Philadelphia or investing that money anywhere else in the state of Pennsylvania, what would you as an individual do?
Did you get an answer, Paul?
By the way, yeah, I was going to say, I have yet to get an answer from any one of them. And I'll tell you something else I offered them is I said to them, I used to own a lot of rental property in the city of Philadelphia. I sold it all for good reason. But I told them when I did, I said, I'll tell you what, I have a Section 8 property. It's all paid off. Don't owe any money. I'll transfer that property to a nonprofit organization. You can have all the profit from that property. You run that property. See what it takes to run a property. Actually, see. Go get your licenses. Go do all those things that other person on the call asked. What are all the things I need to comply with? You go figure out what all you got to do. And don't go in the back door of City Hall or Municipal Services Building to get your licenses. You go in as a regular taxpayer and go get your licenses and figure it out and see what it takes to be a landlord in the city of Philadelphia. None of them took me up on that offer either. I told them you can have all the money, and donate it to nonprofit. They couldn't take the money. So donate it to whatever nonprofit you want. Give it to the school district. I don't care. You can have all the profit from the property. Just see what it's like. None of them would do it.
This is a question. They want to charge separate fees for water and sewer. Do we have to sub-meter the units to do this or divide by square footage?
Is that a multi-family or a single family?
I'm not sure. Elizabeth, if you're still on the call and can clarify.
Subdividing it is obviously the easy way to go. You can do a RUBS billing in Pennsylvania, ratio utility billing. So you can do it based on ratio. You can do it based on the number of people living in the property. There's a lot of ways you can do it. As long as it is right and you're not overcharging the tenant, then it's fine.
This is for a multifamily unit, by the way.
Yes.
Okay. And Cheryl, this is more of a comment that HAPCO has been very helpful with evictions, that the city should clearly explain first that a lead-based paint certificate is needed, then apply an Eclipse for commercial activity license, then rental license. This would be helpful for landlords, all landlords to do.
Yeah. And before you do that, you have to get your business privilege license.
Mhm.
By the way, I do want to correct something I said earlier. The two or fewer exception applies to the security deposits being in excess of 1 month rent. So if you have two or fewer units and you want to take a security deposit of 2 months rent, you can do that and you don't have to offer for the tenant to pay it over 3 months. But it does not apply to the $50 in application fees. Sorry, I had that backwards.
Could you repeat that?
Yeah. The security deposit that law that we talked about before with regard to taking more than 1 month in security deposit. So let's say you took 2 months in security. And I had mentioned that if you take more than 1 month, the tenant has the option of paying that second month over a 3 month period. That law does not apply if you have two or fewer units, if you own two or fewer units. Own or operate or manage two or fewer units.
Yeah, I believe that is finally the end of all questions. It's a shame no one had any concerns to bring up with you. Paul, we thank you very, very much for your time and expertise and willingness to join us and speak with us today. Yes, very, very, very informative. Again, the HAPCO website is a great resource and tool, their newsletter, the GPAR website. We will be sure to post any and all additional resources. As a reminder to all of our GPAR members that we are in communication with organizations like HAPCO and the Apartment Association so that we are advocating on behalf of you and in communication with experts like Paul. So grateful for you always and your advocacy at City Hall. And, oh, sorry, one more late question coming in. What is the owner in an LLC? Did it apply to LLC or owners of LLCs? I'm not sure I understand the question.
Yeah, I'm
The
not
owner,
sure.
yeah. This,
Is Paul still there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
yeah.
Oh, okay.
Selena, if you would like to unmute yourself, you could ask directly.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Sorry, I'm like typing on my phone super fast. The rule regarding up to two properties, does that apply? What if the property is owned in an LLC and that LLC owns only one property?
Yeah, well, if you as an individual own multiple LLCs, then it's not going to apply to you. They'll aggregate them all together.
Okay, thank you.
I do want to say that thank you all for attending this morning. Lexi does an unbelievable job for your organization. I've been working with Lexi for a while now. As she had mentioned in the beginning, we do have a coalition that we work together on getting legislation. I would like to say passed, but it's not passed. It's really what we're working on mostly. And Lexi does an unbelievable job, and Annette as well. She is awesome. She's always out there. She's one of the first people to get involved in stuff, and she does an unbelievable job for your organization and for the rental and real estate community in general.
Great. Thank you so much. All right, everybody. We are very knowledgeable. Thank you so much, Paul, Lexi, Lauren, and Priya over at HAPCO. And please, I encourage you to look into their website and consider membership. I've been a member since the 1990s, and it has benefited me. So thank you again.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye-bye.